I'll deal with a few issues. Yes, yes.
As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get their views on the challenges the country faces and the path it must take to achieve national development. Welcome to Nation Watch. Now here is your host MERVYN Williams, former member of the Guyana Parliament.
Hello and welcome to Nation Watch for today, Sunday, 23rd July 2023. We are going to be discussing some matters in the legal sector. But before we do, we will address a few other issues. You know, Minister Pauline Sukai, I think her full name is Pauline Campbell Sukai, went to the United Nations Forum and spoke at length about the rights of indigenous peoples of Guyana being respected, and sorts of flowery pictures were painted about the excellent nature of relations government of Guyana with indigenous peoples. And she also alluded to something very strange, the National Two-Shows Council being the legal representative of the indigenous peoples of Guyana, having supported or endorsed the sale of carbon credits. Nothing is further from the truth with respect to the legal representation of the people, indigenous peoples of this country. Let's talk a little bit about where Pauline Sukai is misleading not just Guyanese, but international organizations, to wit the United Nations. Let's come home first. When last have you visited the Amerindian Hostel on Princess Street? When last has Pauline Sukai visited the Amerindian Hostel at Princess Street? Pauline, you need to step out of the casino just a little bit and step into your own areas of responsibility. The hostel has a capacity of 113 beds. And we have some pictures here. We'll share them with you. 113 beds to accommodate 150 to 160 people on average on a daily basis. Double bed occupancy in single beds. Beds infested with bed bugs. The sanitation of the premises is just simply horrible. And there are allegations that a senior employee of the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs has been soliciting money. This is an allegation made by persons who say that they are victims of this scam. The government of Guyana provides transportation to take patients back to their homes. And the allegation is that there's a senior member of staff at the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs who's currently building a house and collecting money from the relatives of patients, saying that she has to pay airfares for these persons to go home, whereas the state is providing free transportation. Pauline, you need to investigate and you need to make clear whether these allegations have substance or merit. And have we seen all of those pictures? Have we seen those beds? Look at the condition of this place, Minister Sukai. This is under your watch. This is under your watch. And they're pictures of these beds. Look at the condition of these mattresses. This is a mattress on which two people must sleep, infested with bed bugs. And then, of course, there's this whole business of the carbon credit sales. For your benefit, Pauline Sukai, the highest decision-making forum for indigenous village is the village general meeting. There were no consultations with any village regarding the sale of carbon credits. And the NTC has no authority to speak for any village unless it is given that authority by a village general meeting so to do. The state sold assets belonging to private citizens of this country without their leave, without their approval, without their knowledge. The state is wrong. 18% of this country's lands are owned by indigenous peoples. All of it is forested lands. You do not arbitrarily dispose of assets belonging to private citizens and then come back and tell them what portion of it you are going to give them. And you do not override the Amrinen Act by establishing finance committees of your own, people by your own supporters to manage that money. The village council is the elected authority for managing all of the assets of the village, and every village council has subcommittees of finance, forestry, education, health, and so on. You are violating the Amrinen Act every step of the way. Yes, Mr. Jagdeo, you have set up finance committees. You are wrong. You are violating the Amrinen Act. You need to cease and desist and regularize the actions. Some time ago, talking about the rights of the indigenous peoples here, some time ago, Earlene MacDonald, senior councillor who was elected in the village of Parashara in Region 9, was removed by Pauline Sukai based on a petition which said that she couldn't be trusted because she is a member of the coalition. And Pauline gladly facilitated our removal. There's a letter that we have that we can show you where the decision was made. So in Wakapau, a meeting was held on the 3rd of February, 2023. And at that village general meeting, it was resolved that the Tushawan councillors do not proceed any further with managing projects and expending money because they're alleging severe cases of mismanagement and large sums of money not accounted for. These are the allegations and they're contained in the petition. The minister is required within 30 days by law to act on the petition, to either dismiss it or to appoint a committee to investigate it. She has done neither. Because the Tushao is a PPP favorite for membership to the Indigenous Peoples Commission. So when we talk about indigenous rights, this is a snapshot of where, in fact, the rights of indigenous peoples are being violated and not respected. I don't want to eat up more of the time that we have available because we have some very important issues to discuss. And I would now like to present to you my guest, who is no stranger to any of us, but we just have to get accustomed to addressing him properly. I present to you Dr. Dexter Todd, attorney at law.
Thank you.
Dr. Todd recently completed his doctoral studies at the Charisma University, and he specializes in terrorism and counterterrorism. And his other areas of expertise are fraud investigation, forensic investigation, and alternative dispute resolution, among others. Dr. Todd, I'd like to welcome you to the program, and I want to upfront state that this gentleman is not a political activist. He's not a political personality. He's not a member of, at least not a member of this party. And he is here purely in his professional capacity. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Now, we've had some really, really difficult circumstances in our country. We've had a tragedy. For example, the dormitory the girls' dormitory at Madia in Region 8 was gutted by fire, and we lost 20 young people. We have never had anything like this in the history of our country. In fact, there's one gentleman who lost 6 grandchildren and 1 great grand in that fire. A number of things have happened since that fire on the 21st of May, 2 months ago, including charges being laid, 20 counts of murder against a young lady. In fact, those charges were laid very, very swiftly. The cause of the fire was determined extremely quickly. And a lot happened before that fire that needs to be considered in this whole matter. May I have, for the benefit of the viewers, maybe a brief overarching comment from you, Dr. Todd, about this fire before we get into details? I think you are associated with the person accused of these offenses.
Yes, I am. As I said, I think I said this on a number of interviews and persons who I spoke with relating to the fire investigation. This entire incident occurred in a period, I believe, where there was a call. I had made a call, I think, months before to the police, Guyana Police Force, to give them some assistance, or at least point them in a direction in which they could be encouraged to enhance their training. I think my years of being around the court system, and this is not only as a practicing attorney, but as also a former police officer, is that I'm very clear of the deficiencies in the force. And the concern that I have is that these deficiencies continue to contribute to our society and continue to decay a very fragile fabric of our society, which is the issue of social justice, which is the issue of social order. And so there was a call for the police to join a training, a forensic training, in which I was going to, of course, only be the moderator, but there were going to be a number of experts from around Africa who are well known in this area. And one of such investigation would have, or training, sorry, would have opened the police to a higher and more tactful way on the forensic in dealing with mass casualties and dealing with fires investigation, such as what we had. So when the Madia fire occurred and we heard of so many deaths, I thought that the police were going to make some serious missteps in these investigations, which we saw. So the fire investigation from beginning, we saw a number of things happening that were wrong. We saw no proper cordon of the place. We saw no proper dressing of the persons who were on the scene. And therefore, we knew exactly that the police were not interested in putting a forensic approach to these investigations. So putting that aside, the fire occurred. We had a number of deaths, which remains to be very unfortunate in the country. But to look at the manner in which we handled the entire process is of major concern. You know, in Guyana, we have to be able to test and to relate what we do, match it to what occurs internationally. And when we look at that approach, we can then assess whether we are really handling these matters properly or we are just going through a motion which results in zero for us. And so the concern that I of course personally recognize is that while we had this tragic incident, the way in which it was handled did not really send a very good message in terms of our preparedness for events such as these.
It's rather troubling that, I mean, I looked at it from a distance, thanks to social media. It's rather troubling to see the president, the prime minister, the minister of education, among other members of the executive, walking on debris inside of that burnt out structure, compromising, as it were, whatever evidence may have been there. It is irresponsible, I believe, and it is, in my view, unfortunate that the investigators were not either knowledgeable of the need to keep the area clear and preserve evidence, or were afraid to say to members of the executive, you are encroaching on a secure area, you need to step back. Now, more recently, a matter of days ago, a senior public servant from the region was reportedly involved in making a decision to get rid of some of the debris to fill potholes. And it is clear to any curious mind that the debris was not properly combed, because here it is, the senior public servant is saying to members of the media that they actually found pieces of gold jewelry among debris that was being taken to fill potholes, unfortunately. So outside of the disregard for the the spiritual side, the evidence side is clearly did not benefit from the kind of investigation, and is still not benefiting from being secure and properly investigated. How does this affect not just this case, but future cases of fires in this country? We know of some others, but this one here claimed lives.
You know, our society is advancing, and I believe society is advancing in at a very rapid rate. And I think persons are becoming more advanced in their thinking. Social media has opened us to a number of ideas worldwide. And so our assessment of what is happening locally is always going to be judged critically. And I think when persons look to see how we treat certain events, I think it's very difficult to fool people who are their intellect is now expanded in a way, to a very large way, where you see persons preparing. Listen, I mean, I'm not going to dive into the the likely evidence to come in this matter.
That's fair.
But what is worrying about an entire, you had such an event, you had a situation where it has never happened before in the history of Guyana, where 20 young lives died in one fire. And you mean to say you want to still continue to use the old methods of investigation? Your entire file, the police they have disclosed, the state has disclosed all their statements in this matter against this young lady. And not one statement speaks to a forensic approach. You cannot, the world has gone on so far, you cannot rely on the issues of IC witnesses and alleged confession statements. These things are problematic at trials. And it would not have happened. It would not have happened in some of the most far less developed countries than Guyana. This approach would not have taken place. And when I saw that the manner in which, they were dealing with the alleged crime scene, I thought that these persons were not very interested in taking, even from the debris, taking it to do very detailed forensic tests. And that made me worry about the protocols. And I'm saying, even though you saw individuals on the scene, who was really managing the scene? There was no one I saw who took command, which is a very vital initiative when you're dealing with these types of events. Someone has to take command of the scene, and so who was setting the protocols and ensuring that the protocols were followed? Who was there to advise persons that you couldn't walk just yet? Because actually, when you walk with your bare shoe, you are taking vital pieces of evidence way past or away from the crime scene, which might jeopardize you looking and finding the truth of what happened. Fire investigation, taking a forensic approach, requires you to ensure that when you take samples to your labs, you are able to use your various chemicals and you're able to find not only the accelerants of the fire, but you're able to detail what exactly was the chemical used for this fire. Now, the idea of using a perfume or the idea of using some other form of flammable accelerant would have been important for the police to determine, getting out from the debris, what exactly had occurred. So to treat the crime scene, the alleged crime scene, in that way, really sent a very strong message, not only for this event that which occurred, but in future events, if you do not try to put systems in place immediately, we are not going to be able to protect our society.
I have a view on this matter. I feel very strongly, and I'm basing this on the revelations of the Minister of Education, that there was a report. In fact, there were two reports. I think one done by UNICEF. Forgive me if I get that wrong. But that these reports identified wrought iron grills and padlocks as serious threats to the safety of the occupants of this building. And that the findings of these reports were shared with the various persons in authority, persons who could have rectified the situation. And for more than a year, nothing was done. Now, the police are saying that this fire was deliberately set by this young lady, consequent upon which they charged her for some 20 counts of murder. My contention as an ordinary citizen with no training at all in this area is that had it been a fire that started from an electrical fault, the outcome would have been the same. If a candle had fallen from a stand and come into contact with some piece of fabric, and that was the cause of the fire, the outcome would have been the same. If there was a mosquito coil that was lit and a curtain blew and the fire started, the outcome would have been the same. Those people would have died. Given that, I, again as a layman, cannot see murder. I can't see it. I see a dereliction of duty by some very senior officials, including members of the executive. And I have said before, and I repeat now, that it is my humble view that those children were in the care and custody of the state. The state is obligated to ensure their safety, their welfare, their well-being, and their education. In that regard, for me, the Minister of Education has some serious responsibilities for those children. The regional administration falls under the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development. The maintenance of those buildings, the safety and security of those buildings falls squarely in the lap of the Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, whose local representative is the regional administration. But as they say, the buck stops at the top. The Minister of Amerindian Affairs has a duty first to ensure the welfare and well-being of our indigenous peoples, more so our children. And the Minister of Amerindian Affairs has political representation, has political responsibility for Region 8, for her political party, which is holding the seat of government. I had association with what was then the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, and those responsibilities fell on the person who was in that chair as Vice President and Senior Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. How therefore can a young lady who was part of the resident population of a building be exclusively held responsible for that tragedy that night? Where are the questions that are to be asked of the executive, the persons holding executive power? I am sorely disappointed in the way this matter was handled, but I'm only one citizen. What are your views, Dr. Todd, with respect to where responsibility lies in terms of the safety, security, well-being, welfare of our children who are in custody and care of the state, such as these young people were?
I think the answer is I think the question is a rhetorical one, because I think the answer, you have given the answer to the question. And I believe that just at the end, if we are to hold in this country an inquiry into this particular incident, I don't believe that there will ever be an outcome which will not point to other persons who held various responsibilities. And those responsibilities, I don't think that they will be able to shy away from them at all, because it is very clear that various persons would have had responsibilities, and it's either those responsibilities were not reviewed very seriously, or they were not taken seriously. And I think that this result, the consequence of this, of what has happened, must not fall off of their shoulders. I think if you want to look at it from a very objective standpoint, you may want to look and to see what in a civil realm, who are the persons that can be named who held responsibility, and that can of course lead you to some other persons in addition to who the police say is responsible. The police at this stage, I think objectively, only pointed to the criminal side of it, and they were looking to see who has at this stage criminal liability for what had happened. I think the findings of the preliminary inquiry, or if it goes to trial, may very well act as some form of education for the law enforcement agencies, and it might teach them a different lesson, that criminal liability is very strict, and it requires elements to be established, which they have the responsibility of establishing. If they're successful at that, we are to see. I have a different view in relation to criminal liability, and I have a different view to the approach that they have taken, and that is why we're putting it at the feet of the court, and for the court to make a determination on it.
Now, here we are, 2 months following this tragedy. There have been several commitments being made about a commission of inquiry. I believe someone was named to lead that inquiry. I do not know if that's the full extent, if it's a one-person panel or if it will be expanded. We do not have any information regarding technical experts being contacted to do any work for this inquiry. But a number of things have happened before the promise of the inquiry and before the naming of the person who will lead it. Someone has been criminally charged. Members of the executive and others have trampled upon the scene without regard for, what protocols need to be observed. The state, through the Attorney General, has caused the signing of some agreements to take place, which agreements purportedly sealed settlement with the families of the deceased in the sum of $5 million per life. The mother of the person who has been charged for murder, is now a counselor in the municipality of Mario representing the People's Progressive Party, which is the party in government. Debris from the scene has been removed and was being used to fill potholes. The debris, as I said earlier, revealed that there was no proper combing for evidential material because some have been found. How do all of these things affect or impact on a commission of inquiry? Should not a commission of inquiry come before, at minimum, talks of settlement and the laying of charges? What does this mean for a possible outcome? This looks as though it's heading for another sweep under the carpet. My personal view.
You see, one must not allow him or herself to speculate as to what those terms of references will be for a commission of inquiry. And
There shouldn't be a state secret either.
well, I would think at some stage it as all it's been the practice that these things are disclosed. But I don't want to speculate as to what the commission of inquiry will be responsible for and what they are going to be inquiring in. I would say, though, that if they are looking primarily at the protocols, the safety of buildings and so on, they may not need to go to the ground. But if their approach to this inquiry is very broad, which would require them to not only look at the safety of the building, but also look at various elements which would impact the use of some form of forensic analysis. Then you would have, because of the time period and all the activities that had occurred after the event, well, I think will affect them tremendously. Let's say if the commissioners decide that let's walk on the ground to really look at the layout of certain things and to give various recommendations, I think it's going to also be affected because of the passage of time and all the activities that took place. And so I found that and this is my personal view, that the approach to settle is a bit premature because
It's a bit insulting to the value.
that's another story in itself. But even if the state wants to be responsible, you have to recognize that the commission of inquiry will end with some form of recommendations.
Indeed.
And if those recommendations, because I would think that such an inquiry will attract persons of interest who may want to come on board to assist the commission in making findings, because these findings, I believe, can only aid in the betterment of our society and the safety of our children at schools. So they might be interested parties to assist in that process. But you affect the end result of a commission of inquiry. Because now if you have an agreement and the findings of that commission of inquiry is that the state must do 1, 2, 3, 4 things. And one of those things would be for compensation for the families. Then you've already done that. And you have not allowed the parties to be involved in the negotiation process as to what might be an acceptable amount for compensation. I have not seen the agreement, and I don't know if the agreement leaves room for that type of approach coming out of the Commission of Inquiry. So it has a lot to do with what really the mandate of the Commission of Inquiry will be. Maybe they will not go as far. Maybe their terms of reference will not take them as far. So we'll definitely have to wait and see on that.
My final comment on this one is that to cause these agreements to be signed appears to me to be a case of shutting down civil litigation for settlement. And it's unfortunate because I believe that people have a right to test the system in court and to test the question of responsibility and to test the question of the state's exposure to liability for situations such as these. To call people to the table and offer them that in a secluded setting suggests to me that, better could have been done. And the system could have been openly tested in the court of law. And because everyone's set of circumstances obviously will not be the same. And when you have a case of $5 million being offered for the settlement of a situation where someone died, and you have allegations and rumors around the place about $10 and $25 million being offered for settlement of alleged rape, you have issues, inequalities, and so on. Viewers, I am MERVYN Williams. I'm your host here on Nation Watch. Nation Watch, of course, is a People's National Congress reform production. And I'm chatting away with my guest, who is Dr. Dexter Todd, attorney at law. And we are going to, for the next, 15, 16 minutes or so, going to continue a conversation on another matter, the matter of an allegation of rape against some member of the executive. I do not propose to get into any conversation regarding merits, demerits, fact, fiction. My focus here, Dr. Todd, is on the handling of this matter. First, there was disclosure, public disclosure, form of a statement or letter, which two retired senior police officers contend satisfy all of the elements for the laying of a charge against the person who is alleged to have committed these offenses. And then we had, I believe, an unprecedented situation where a divisional commander steps down to do the job of a constable to take a statement. The statement itself suggests why it took a commander to do it, but that's a whole other story. And then, of course, there was a recant from the person who made the allegation, saying, I had nothing to do with this. And then there was a comeback to say everything contained in these documents and messages, everything is true. I stand by this. And then there was a case where the alleged victim, as the police refers to the person, was taken into what is called protective custody, which is basically a prison-like environment. And it is reported that this young woman had, a young woman of indigenous extraction, I might add, had to suffer the indignity of repeating her story multiple times, which I do not believe is usual in such cases, and to multiple agencies. And there are reports as well that her cell phone was removed from her person. She had no access to it. And then eventually all of the persons in this facility had their cell phones taken away from them for fear that she would be contacting persons outside. All of these things happened. And then the police asked the Director of Public Prosecutions for guidance. Unusual in the circumstances because we know of other cases where they have charged persons with offenses when investigations had not been completed. And then the Director of Public Prosecution sends back the file to the police for some additional things to be done. Some say buying time to allow something to happen. Eventually, the young lady said, hey, I can't continue this anymore. I'm done. I'm tired. I can't deal with this anymore. There's a contention that an entire state was thrown at a young girl. And then finally, there is a well-dressed, decked out young lady who comes out and says, look, these things aren't true. I'm not associated with this. I'm not associated with that. But there are persons out there who say, you confided in me. I have all the messages. I have all the voice notes. And what you're saying there is contrary to what you said to me. Persons are putting this down to pressure from state institutions, state organizations, and non-state organizations. The handling of this matter has implications for future such cases. What are some of those implications? And was this matter handled in a usual manner? Was it a case of special treatment? There's also the allegation being made by two retired police officers, senior police officers, that notwithstanding the fact that a public statement was made at $1 million bail, station bail, the person who allegedly committed these offenses was placed on $1 million bail. These two gentlemen openly said, and they have not been challenged, that not a single cent was paid to the police. There's no receipt, there's no entry in a logbook, there's no evidence of transfer of any $1 million from the Dam police station to the police finance division. So they have concluded, not me, not Mervyn Williams, these two gentlemen have concluded that no bail was in fact paid. Tell us about the handling of this matter. We are all lay people. You are the expert here.
All right. I have to try to not be too complex and technical. But there's the term criminal process has been underplayed a lot in society. And there are three pillars of our criminal justice system. We have the law enforcement agencies, the courts, and you have the correction institutions. Now, I think that the law enforcement agencies, they carry a very important role in ensuring that the criminal process is protected. The integrity of investigation is guarded. Because what you want happening is that when matters go before the courts, those matters were thoroughly, properly investigated, and that you make sure that the type of facts which the court will now consider, whether it's evidence or not, they must be one in which is fair. It is fair for someone to be accused of an offense. In this particular case, that of rape. The fairness is that you do not treat that person as though the person is guilty, because a man is innocent until proven guilty. The courts have the responsibility of determining the guilt. In terms of sexual offenses, we still have the jury system in Guyana. So it is the jury, the members of the panel, who must listen to the facts of the case and who must determine whether the man is guilty or not. That has always been a fundamental element of the fairness of a trial in relation to how you treat the individuals. Now, the system now, the criminal system requires the police to have identifiable protocols which guards against biasness, unfairness, and protects their integrity. And that protection is not only for the victim, but it's also for the accused person. Now, as I know it, a charge or an allegation of rape will require the Director of Public Prosecution to recommend charges. There are some offenses in which the police are able to institute charges without those advised, and those will be very small summary matters. Serious matters such as rape would require the Director of Public Prosecutions to look through. And the reason I believe that is so, one, the penalty for rape is serious. And two, the protocols in relation to how you treat the investigation process for rape allegations, the Director of Public Prosecutions must, or the chambers must assist in making sure that not only the statements are prepared in accordance to law, but that the process was followed. Now, the concerns raised in this particular matter is that the protocols were outside of the norm. And I believe that is where the confusion came. Unless the police or the authorities can establish that a forensic investigation in which you have repeated interviews of a victim is the normal thing, and it had occurred on numerous occasions in Guyana, we may not have an argument. We do not know of this type of approach. We do not know of you using Blossom as the conducting the forensic interview. And when Blossom couldn't penetrate or get through on a point that you wanted further investigation on, you changed to Chilling. So now Chilling comes to do what Blossom would have done. So Chilling now are asking questions. You know, the issues here is what exactly were they trying to achieve in this multiple interviews of the victim? And again, if that is the normal practice, it should be discouraged, because it is not.
But is it?
Well, I don't know of any protocol internationally which follows that type of approach. Because when you question a victim repeatedly, what you invariably do is allow the victim to relive the events every time you ask them. And so psychologically, it is not aiding in the comfort of the person or the victim. And therefore, there are certain questions. You see, what persons have concerns about is the process, not really the issue that the man did the act, because no one could say the man did the act, because it is only for the court to determine whether he did the act.
Right.
But the process is what concerned, I think, a number of persons. Now, the recantation, well, I hold a different view. I do not believe that it is a recantation of the statement at all. All I see moving on social media is the victim coming to say well, this did not happen.
No mass.
Well, if that did not happen, the authorities, they have a responsibility to protect the process. So now you move into a realm in which allegedly you're thinking that an allegation was made that was false. And if an allegation which was made, which is false, then there is a law dealing with that.
Consequences to flow.
And so the authorities must be guided accordingly.
I think the question on the minds of many of our viewers is this. Does a person as young as this, again, I go to the police, alleged victim, have the, first, the right, second, the capacity, and third, is she is she psychologically positioned to make on her own a decision to say, I am not going further with this? In the face of such a declaration that I do not want to proceed further with this, is there any provision in law for the state, notwithstanding that declaration, to proceed with a matter, not particularly this one, but matters generally of this nature?
Now, one will argue that if you do not have the virtual complainant, which is in these types of matters, presents himself as the main witness in the matter. And in the main witness, because coming out of the Sexual Offences Act of 2010, it removed.
One that they sat on a select committee to discuss.
It removed, I believe it's section 69 or so. It removed the requirement for corroborative evidence. So there is no need for any supporting evidence to be placed before the court, which would support the victim's statement.
Right.
So in that regard, a case can be problematic if it goes before the court and you do not have a victim. In my experience, I have seen the courts move ahead with a charge of rape, but only on the basis that the victim was not the only alleged IC witness.
Okay.
And so in this particular case where the victim is not willing to proceed with the matter, my comment was that I thought that the Director of Public Prosecution's office would have gone a little further to have a proper evaluation of the victim at that stage, to see whether the victim really was under any form of undue pressure. But I think the justification that at least this is what was in the public's domain, the justification was that there was, of course, a parent who was present, there was a probation officer, and there was the police who were all present when certain things were made. Maybe, so that really was the justification. But if you really, again, match this to international standards, it's unacceptable. And even if Guyana wants to stand out in its approach to sexual offenses matters, it must be very guarded that the process in which they're using is not one in which is followed anywhere. Even the protocols under the sexual offenses is problematic. Guyana cannot stand up and represent very strongly the need for removing corroborative evidence. It's unjustified. It was unjustifiable. And unless that particular section is challenged and challenged successfully, I believe we're going to have problems with sexual offenses in Guyana, those matters in Guyana.
The last very instructive words for this program from Dr. Dexter Todd, attorney at law. I want to thank you very much for joining me on this program and for making clear the issues that you've made clear to our viewers.
Yes.
And I've learned a lot here today as well. To our viewers, thank you very much for joining us and staying with us through the course of this program. I'm your host, MERVYN Williams, thanking you very much for joining me and my guest, Dr. Todd. And we look forward to having your company again next Sunday by God's grace. Until then, be good, stay safe.